There have been more mass shootings this year than there are days that have passed in this year to date. I need you to let that sink in for a minute. This weekend alone, there were 4 that were reported on a national level. There was the shooting in Michigan at a Mormon church in which the shooter crashed his vehicle into the church and then set it on fire. There was a shooting in a North Carolina waterfront bar in which the shooter opened fire into the crowd at the bar from a boat. There was a shooting in Texas at a casino during a raffle event, and there was a shooting in New Orleans on Bourbon Street. Keep in mind, that's just what made the headlines, and that's also just what happened over the 2 days of the weekend. And at this point, I don't think that anybody can argue that there's not a problem with this in this country. But inevitably, when we start having conversations about these things, people just love to point fingers and pass the blame along to wherever they think the issue is. Where people in this country start to get their hackles up is when we start to talk about how to try and solve this problem. You can't mention any sort of gun control in this country without getting yelled at by the 2A crowd. You remember the ones I was talking about yesterday, the ones that were like, tyranny, what's that? Because you're always going to be met with guns aren't the problem. Well, they kind of are. At least they're part of it. Also, while it's gotten a lot less taboo over the years, you can't really even mention mental health as being part of the core issue of these problems without being scoffed at. Because there are still too many people, especially those that are in the older generation, looking at you boomers, who think that mental health is just not a thing. Just take those feelings and shove them way deep down until something like this happens. And the one thing you really can't talk about is that this administration has allowed the landscape to be created where this dried out tinderbox has been allowed to exist and dry out even further with the polarization and the us versus them mentality, whatever form that may take in people's minds. Prime example for the Michigan shooting, Trump posted that this shooting was an attack on Christianity, which, how about you just shut the fuck up? Let the investigation actually decide what's going on before you just dry this tinderbox out even further. Oops, I mentioned it. No, you can't mention that. You can't mention that lest you incur the wrath of the billionaire fuckfaces. We spend so much time trying to find out the cause of each one of these events, asking ourselves, how could this happen? Who could do such a thing? Prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law, death penalties, punishments, all the things. And all the while, we do nothing to try to prevent more of these events from happening. Everything is reactionary. There is no proactivity anymore. All that proactivity funding got yanked to hire more unqualified DHS agents, just so you know. And thus, the cycle continues. Listen, there are no easy solutions, people, at all. But I do know factually that doing nothing and hoping that this problem will solve itself will never work. We've been doing that for decades, and yet here we are. Just a few things to think about today. Anyway, it's day 251 in a series in which I ask myself, do I have to go to work today? And if the answer is yes, I don't care. Here we go. Do you have to go to work today? I do. Listen, if you're having problems, there are still resources out there, scant as they may be. Go talk to someone. See you tomorrow.